this lecture and the next lecture is devoted to the psychic reading, also called the cold reading, when it's done deliberately by someone who knows what they're doing. Who's aware that this is a tool, a technique that's exploiting the limitations or the biases of the human mind and taking advantage of it. I like the psychic reading, being a skeptic, and I think it's and being a person who wrote the major chapter in the annual review. I wrote a chapter, the only time they ever had it, in the annual reviews of psychology, on the psychology of deception. And as a psychologist, I would say my specialist was the psychology of deception. And to me, the cold reading of the psychic reading represents a prototype, a good example that contains everything that we want to talk about, or how people believe, how powerful it is, how vividness, how the power of a story about, and how dealing with yourself can override everything else and create a reality. It's very, very powerful, and I find this a very good thing to use to understand how the mind works and doesn't work, and what motivates us, what gets us excited, and so on. And so what we're going to do now, this lecture will be mostly on giving you samples of readings, a lot by myself, but I've also got Randy in here. And then, if we have time, this lecture, we're going to give you a little thing I do in my workshops. I'm going to pair you off. Hopefully, when I pair you off, I'm going to try, you probably know each other a lot, but try and get you, match you up with people you least know, so you're more effective that way. And I'm going to teach you how to give each other a reading. I'm going to teach you what I call a systematic scan. And it's very powerful. I've done it over and over again, so I know by experience that this works. I did it recently at a workshop on cold reading at the TAM last year, and we had 130 people in that room, as big as I've ever had, because I always like the small group. We paired everyone off, and the average accuracy rating that people gave each other's readings was 85%. By the way, that's a magic number, because that over the last 20 years of my doing these workshops is about the average accuracy rating I get, is about 85%. So that's about, that's a little better than you're going to do, than the ordinary psychics do. So just after this one little reading, you're going to be better than most psychics. Okay, so let's start off with some examples. Let's start off with the Superpower show, okay? That was a show done in Britain on one of the channels there in 1990. I want to show you a segment where they had me come there on that show, because they have a man in England called Christian Dion. Well, you'll see it. Let's talk for himself. Go show that.
John, Christian's here with the tarot cards. If you want Christian to have a look at the future, 071 603 1152. So get dialing now for that. Okay, well the phones are buzzing, and Florence is in Ilford.
As we pick out the cards, there's two things, particularly going back.
Ray Hyman is on the Executive Council of Psychop. He's listening to tapes of English psychic Christian Dion's radio talk show, sent to him in America by a British associate. In the show, Dion questions callers and gives them psychic readings and advice.
London Talkback Radio.
Hyman came over to London to investigate.
Hi, Yvonne.
All right.
How are you?
Fine.
Shuffling going on?
Shuffle the rounds, yeah. Well, I think people don't actually believe it. I shuffle them all the time and change them around, but we do, kids, we do.
Certainly do.
What? Over the last sort of basically 12 years, it's been a bit of a dodgy patch, Yvonne.
That's right.
And I feel that you have also been draining yourself a lot recently. You've been getting yourself all wound up.
Yeah.
Very, very much so. And without being rude, you've lost your sparkle.
That's right.
You know, it's like you're not you at the minute. We need to get your sparkle back. I think that will be better as we go into the autumn. It's a bit like being able to view a videotape of someone's life. You can see the past, the present time, the future time, which gives them evidence, if you want, that things you're predicting for the future are good, or at least accurate.
Right. Is there anything particular you wanted to find out about? It just helps him pick up on things. Right. Stay on the line. We're with you soon. If you can just make sure your radio's turned off. You'll hear it down the line.
Well, what do Dion's callers think? Is Yvonne from Acton convinced of his psychic powers?
Yvonne, you just had a consultation with Christian Dion. What do you think of Christian?
I thought he was good. It was right what he said to me.
What were some of the things that he said?
Well, he said there was ups and downs in the last 12 years, and in the last 2, and also that I tend to put everybody else before myself, and I've lost my sparkle. You know, that was all. And he said about a property deal, which I take it he means moving between now and Easter next year.
Is that something you have been thinking
Well,
about?
we have, yeah. And he seems to think that it will happen.
She's just one person, and many, many thousands of people seem to be just as convinced as she is. And the sad thing is that there are alternative explanations.
Today on News Radio.
Back in Buffalo, Hyman is going to show how to read people's minds without psychic powers.
24 minutes after 10 o'clock, my guest in studio, Mr. X, a psychic reader, a gentleman who is able to tell you many things intuitively about yourself through the use of his ability to focus in on your psychic energy, and also with the use of tarot cards, which he has in front of them now. Good morning, Julie.
Good morning.
How are you?
Fine, thank you. And you?
Good. You sound very chipper and very happy. So I also see that you've had probably some daydreams only. It's just really fantasy daydream type of thing where you even thought of maybe running away once in a while and maybe starting life anew with a new relationship and so on. But that's just because of this problem of, as you begin to think of the youth that's now slipping by and facing the future.
Oh, good. And that part of it's taken care of. Well, that was remarkably accurate. I compliment you on that.
Thank you now. Bye-bye.
Cold reading is when you meet a client whom you've never met before. We call it meeting them cold, and give them a reading that is insightful and the client thinks gets to the core of his or her personality. And the way this is achieved, in a nutshell, is to give the client general statements that could apply to anyone, but then you gradually refine them by the feedback you get from the client. And once you get this feedback and refine it, you make sure that the whole message is wrapped up with this rule. The basic rule is you tell them what they want to hear. Now let me give you an example of what is like a cold reading. Let me show you what Christian Dion was doing, just a little sample from him.
This year to Easter of next year, before you're able to get the property matter completely organised. Okay? Now, that doesn't mean to say it's going to take the whole of that time. It's in that time.
Did you say property matters?
Property matters.
What do you mean by that?
Well, because around you property-wise, it's as though there's no settlement at the moment.
Yeah.
He's talking about this property matter, and he said it's not necessarily that during that time, but in this time, which actually, if you think about it, covers quite a big range. There's a big range of things there.
The next 5-year block.
You could break down his whole approach to a simple formula, which I think would be very easy to write on a computer. And the reason you can do this, by the way, is that it's not Christian Dion who makes these readings so successful. It's the people who are listening. They are putting the meaning in there.
I haven't actually got a partner.
At all?
No, not in that way, no.
I'm talking romantically, obviously.
No.
Right. At all?
No, nobody.
All
not
right.
romantically, no.
All right, we'll let that one ride. I couldn't agree with them more in the saying that anybody can do what I do, because we all have the power. It's just that they haven't, got the logic, if they want to use that word, to see that we don't tell them general things anyway. When people come for readings, it's very specific things. And if I was telling people general things, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing, because people wouldn't come and see me. So the skeptics have got the problem, not myself.
About 97% is my estimation of people who do psychic readings believe in what they're doing. Even though, if you listen to them over and over again, they have a very simple formula, very repetitive.
Do you want it in an honest answer? I think they're thick. I honestly think they are thick.
I mean, do you think they feel a challenge to their personal
I think
belief systems?
well, maybe they have a challenge to the belief systems as we all have, but I think they're basically inadequate and they are thick. I mean, they've tried it before. No doubt they'll attack me after that, and they'll try it again. But good luck to them.
She'll always work because she's completely dedicated. I would like, anyway, without further ado, to introduce you to this remarkable medium, this wonderful sensitive, Doris Collins.
Doris Collins is Britain's most famous medium and healer. And not surprisingly, she hasn't escaped
Doris Collins, I will say something about Doris Collins. She was at that time the top medium in England.
And that's Doris Stokes or Doris Collins?
Doris Collins. And a guy named, I'm trying to think of his name, he had a talk show on PBS all the time. He was very famous for a while. And then he, oh boy, I wish I could think of his name. I'm so bad at it. But anyways, some of you would recognize his name. But anyways, he was had a talk show, and he brought her to the United States because she's so famous in England. And one of the things she does, she stands up in front of a crowd. She preceded, well, many years before there was a John Edwin stuff doing the same stuff. But she would stand in front of the crowd in England and say, I get an Abbott, a name Abbott, does anyone recognize the name Abbott, and stuff like that, because someone would, and so on. He brought her to the United States and had her on his show, and she bombed completely. No recognized names she was throwing out. And the problem was that all the names she throws out are standard names in England, and they're not the standard names in this country.
Oh, no.
Another thing that's like that, there's a guy named George Alexander who became who was the predecessor of John Edward and Van Praagh. They're just copying him. They're poor imitations of John Anderson. But John Anderson had it down to the things they had. They had it down to a very simple form. Again, I could write a program for her. And I was on Larry King Live opposite George Anderson one year. Larry King wasn't on that show. He was away, and there was a substitute, Mary something or other. I forget her name. So she was the hostess of the show. And I went to San Francisco, and George Anderson at that time had a radio show, and he was had a book out. He's still alive you can see him on the internet. He still runs his stuff, but he was a big deal at that time. He was the medium that talked to people, and I think he's the guy who began to develop what I would call a modern approach to doing readings for mediums. But his approach was simple. He would say, someone would call in. Usually you did this on the radio all the time, but sometimes on TV too. Someone would call in and he'd say, I get a name like Jonathan. Jonathan. Does that name mean anything to you? And if they say yes, he would then say, living or dead? If they said dead, then it said Jonathan was trying to reach you. This is a message from Jonathan to you. If they say living, okay, there's a spirit out here trying to reach Jonathan. And then he go on and stuff. That was the basis of his thing. Okay, so he's on. I'm supposed to be the poo-poo guy, the party pooper. Anyway, I'm on, and Anderson gets the first call. Someone calls, and it's obviously an elderly lady. You can tell from her voice. And he says, I get the name John. Do you know a John? She hesitates, and she says, no. And he says, no, John, don't you ever have a John in your life? She says, no. And then he says, oh, I see, the static in the air. It's Joe. Joseph. Did you know Joe or Joseph? No. I'm saying here, boy, I don't have to do anything. And he went through, it's Jill. It's Jillian. That's what, the static is pretty bad on the other side. And she didn't know Jillian at all. And he went through a few more, and this was a big bust. She didn't know anything. Later on my way back to Eugene from San Francisco, it dawned on me, she's calling from New Mexico. It said from Mexico. She's probably on the reservation. And they don't have names like Joe, Jillian, and stuff like that, but which he gets away with all the time because they're standard names, right? And he can transform them. And John Edwards taken over that thing. He throws out the name, and it's not Jack, it's John, not Jack, John. Okay, it's Joseph, and so on. And it's always something as simple as that. It works, though. It works. This guy's a millionaire now, right? And so don't knock it. But
she doesn't know it, but the reader, who's a University of Oregon psychology professor, says palm reading is pure fiction. And Diana doesn't believe in it herself. But something strange is about to happen. Diana is going to become a believer.
You have a hard time hanging on to money. You have spaces between your fingers. And
Ray Hyman gently raises common topics like money or career, on the lookout for giveaway responses, a nod here or a word there.
Counting. Let other people do your income tax.
Okay.
Otherwise, you do. Okay, good. The fate line comes very late, very, very late out of your lifeline. And that suggests your career is very, very late in coming. This is children, you know, and lots of them are there.
After about 20 minutes, Ray is feeding back to Diana what he's gathered she probably wants to hear.
6.
Jeez, I better hurry.
How accurate was it?
Pretty accurate.
Really?
Yeah. The career, about 4 years ago, I started selling insurance and have just now decided that it's really not what I want to do. Kids, of course, I have 1 child, but my mother has 5. My sister has 5.
So now Diana thinks there might be something to
I
this.
think I was really meant to have more children, but I never married young. And then when he said accounting and stuff, he's right. I'm not a bookkeeper. I don't want to be. And I let other people handle my taxes and everything.
She and I are working as a team.
Yeah.
I call it a symbiotic relationship. She wants me to be right because, you know, could help her. And, of course, I want to be right because it's an ego trip for me as a reader. And so we're helping each other.
So was there a point during this where you said to yourself, oh, this guy has some ability?
Yes.
Now what about now? Now that you know that he doesn't believe in it, that he's just reading what you told him, how do you feel about the future? How do you feel about the things he told you about the future?
Well, pretty much the same, except that I'm going to, it's nice to know that I have a big, strong marriage line there.
This is really interesting. You're thinking about the things he told you and you're considering them and you're reconsidering your life in a way, even though it was like a put-up job.
I think that I was taking the stuff that I believe I want to happen to be true.
Most of us look at the world in the same way as Diana. We pick the bits of a horoscope we like and read them into the stars.
The rest of the show had me, the reason he came to Eugene, he wanted me to test a dowser. And we did that. We set up a test of a dowser, and we tested this dowser. He was a nice guy, and he wanted me to test, and I was able to, and I used Barry Byerstein to help me, and we went to the fairgrounds because he dowsed. He had to have a place that was going to be no electric wires around and stuff like that. So we went to the fairgrounds, and we did a nice test of the dowser. He said he could locate metal under a bucket, so we had 10 buckets, and we very strong, double blind. Barry Byerstein would place the thing according to a random schedule under one of the 10 buckets, and then mix the buckets a little bit so that you couldn't tell that one had been handled, while Alan Alda and I and the dowser were away, and then we would come back, and that Barry would go out of the way, because so he knew where it was, and he couldn't inadvertently give us any clues. And the dowser would use his rod to find the object we had placed under one of the buckets. And he just flat out was bad at it. Even though this was his test, he suggested. It was very bad. And Alan Alda was a very nice guy, and you could see he was puzzled by this gal here because she was inconsistent. And afterwards, there's more that goes on, you know, but they caught a lot of the important things on this thing here. She was adamant that she didn't believe any of this stuff, but she was also adamant that I told her things that no one could have known by normal means. And she insisted on both. And Alan was puzzled. He was trying to get her to see the contradiction in it. She didn't see any contradiction. She doesn't believe this stuff at all, but he knows stuff that no one could have known by any normal means. And he told me that, and he was right on everything. So it was very puzzling. Well, another thing happened with this dowser. After he failed everything, we got into the van to drive back to the university because we were doing most of the show from the university. As we were driving back, Alan asked the dowser, he said, look, you were so sure of this before you went into this, and yet you bombed. How do you explain that? So he said, well, I don't blame Professor Hyman. I don't blame any of you. Professor Hyman was very nice. He did everything that he said he was going to do, and he fulfilled all my conditions. He says, but I think the problem is that science hasn't caught up with us yet. It's only come across that way, but I love that because he said that, and Alan said, what do you mean by that? He said, well, science is not ready to detect what I do, you know. Then it's not ready. So we're too far, we're how far ahead of science. So I love that. Anyway, it gets louder, I think, later. I don't know.
This is what they typically experience. Scary.
I was not such a kid. I wasn't seeing people with their heads blown off and all that kind of stuff.
In the real world, being a so-called psychic is a little less dramatic and more financially rewarding. There goes the dark rooms, but a guy who claims to channel spirits is working the room here and in the hereafter in a banquet hall at a Holiday Inn. His name is John Edward. And he says he not only sees dead people, but can deliver messages to their loved ones.
You show me pink roses. When I see pink roses, that's the only stuff in your love. And you have like bouquets and bouquets and bouquets of being handed and put around you.
John Edward is 31 years old, the son of a New York City cop who says even as a teenager, he knew he was different.
Coming from a large Italian family, I would know he was showing up at my grandma's house on Sunday unannounced.
You would know before they knocked.
I would know before they came. And then it got to, I used to play games with my mother. So like Saturday night, I would sit down and say, like, what times they were going to come. I would say, okay, 2 o'clock, this was coming. 3 o'clock, this was coming. And usually what I said was going to come, was coming a lot.
I think what we should do now is go forward some more to, because near the end of the show it gets much more interesting, because at the first half of the show it's all positive. It seems like he's hitting with that group and everything else, but later you find something else at the end of the show. There's Gary Schwartz, who I had some very strange interactions with, but he validates Edward among others. He's a professor at, Joe does a very good job on this show.
Died of a heart attack. He was only 42. And there was someone else in the room with him, and there was a lot of suspicious circumstances around it.
So John Edward did hone in on a suspicious death.
What if we can have a snapshot of all the people John Edwards said were clamoring to send a message to the living? What kind of people would we find they are? Well, they're not angry folks. They're not bitter about being taken too soon. We heard no stories of pain and suffering, no calls for revenge or settling of scores. These dead people are nice, and maybe a little boring. But as we saw here, even a nice, boring word from the dead beats a whole sermon from anybody in this world.
She's making me feel that you have developed spiritually, like you're opening up more and more to this. These seem to be the people that are coming through, they're congratulating on the baby. And she's making me feel like there's something with real estate or investments that come up around you that you're going to be getting involved with.
Still, something else happened that night in the group readings. A departed family member does seem to come through loud and clear.
Hold on. It's time to acknowledge Anthony. Are you waving like that's me? That's you? Really?
For, of all people, Dateline cameraman Tony Pagano, one of 2 cameramen shooting our story. John Edwards zeroes in on the fact that Tony's father has died.
Did you not see Dad before he passed? Had you been away or had been distant?
Yeah, I was away.
Okay, because he's making me feel like we need to move past this. Was he a Yankees fan?
No, he died again if you heard that.
And he's telling me to acknowledge he found the ring. I don't know what this means.
Well, I had a ring that was given to me. I only wore one piece of jewelry beside my wedding ring. And when my dad died, the last time I saw him in the coffin, I took that ring off and put it on his hand.
He said some things that were very personal, that only I knew. And putting the ring on his finger, on my dad's finger when he died, was really something that I don't think anyone else saw.
When you watch a lot of these readings, ring, photo, dog, these things come up over and over, and you're almost sure to get a hit. I mean, I have maybe a dozen memories involving a reading in some way.
In fact, jewelry did come up several times during this group reading.
You also found the ring. Your mom's ring would make me feel like I need to talk about the bracelet or the watch. There's a bracelet or watch connection that comes up with this.
There was a lot of talk of special months.
I want to talk to you, and I want to talk to you about either the 10th, which either means that it's October, the month of October, or the 10th of the month having some type of meaning. But she's telling me definitely talk about April. She's showing me April. Whose birthday is this? Mine.
And of course, how people die. Cancer and heart disease are the two major causes of death. We'll hear a lot about that.
Actually, somebody passes from cancer also there. They're showing me cancer. Some type of congestion that comes up in the chest. So either somebody had congestive heart failure, pneumonia, or they could not breathe. There's a problem that comes up in this area. And who passed from breast cancer?
But John Edward also came up with specific information. For these people, it seemed right on target.
Is there anybody with a unique S name? Would anybody have really diseased skins, like when they have like prickly skin, like psoriasis? Who is this? Yeah, yeah.
No, it's Dave's confused me. My name sounds like psoriasis. It's Soraya.
Well, they try to show you parents. You understand that? Yes. Okay. That's for you. This is coming through. Now tell me connected to the twins. What twins? Yes? You understand this? Okay. Who are the twins?
My daughters and granddaughters.
Our twins? Okay.
And he was right about our cameraman Tony's father, Anthony. He had passed away.
You got Anthony. That's pretty good, Anthony. We've seen mediums who mill about before sessions and read people and chat with them and pick up things.
John Edward had made it a point to avoid any contact before that night's session. But remember this footage of Edward dancing? Tony was the cameraman and shot this just hours before the group reading.
You met Tony before, though, right?
Early that day? Yeah.
They not only had met, but Tony told John Edward a critical piece of information during the shoot.
Were you aware that your dad had done it before you did this reading?
I think earlier in the day he said something.
And it makes me feel like, you know, that's fairly significant.
Okay.
So that's not some energy coming through, that's something you knew going in. You knew his name was Tony, and you knew that his dad had died, and you knew he was in the room, right?
That's a whole lot of thinking you got me doing then. Like I said, I react to what's coming through, but I see, hear, and feel. I interpret what I'm seeing, hearing, and feeling, and I define it. He raised his hand, it made sense to him, great.
But a cynic would look at that and go, hey, you know, this is the cameraman, he goes, it's Dateline, you know, wouldn't that be impressive if you get the cameraman to cry?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. No.
But grieving is emotional, whatever the trigger. Tony, our cameraman, was clearly moved. So was Pam. She was in tears.
There's nothing more deep-seated and resonant with people than the idea of the above. This is a very vulnerable person. He has crossed, in my mind, a line into a rather sacred domain that, for me, would be off limits.
I tell people, I do not see what I do as being grief therapy, and I don't want to be looked at as a grief therapist. I think that it can help you. It could be healing.
You're in charge that people like you, and maybe even you, make money off of people's grief.
Very clearly, every person who does what they do for a living needs to be paid so they can continue to do what they do.
What I asked you was, are you making money off people's grief? And it sounds like you're saying to me, hey, I could charge 3 times as much. That's how much people want to do this.
You're right, I could charge 3 times as much, but I don't. I think that there's a value to what I do. You pay for my time, but you can't put a price tag on the experience itself. That is priceless.
Is it the experience that is priceless, or the passionate beliefs of John Edwards' followers that makes it possible? After all, non-believers aren't likely to seek out a medium, never mind pay one. If someone willingly wants to go, though, what's the harm?
We're never going to know the truth. Truth doesn't matter here. Truth should matter. But the idea that the end justifies the means is always ethically a pretty dicey area. It might be okay if I flatter you a little or if I help you, but you're starting down a slippery slope when you start doing that.
But all 13 people who were at the group reading told us afterwards that the experience was worthwhile. Pam Pasica says all that matters to her is that she and people like her have found some comfort.
There are people that lose little children, that lose spouses, that lose parents. If they are walking away from him comforted and happy, and they can go on living their lives, what is the skepticism? what could he possibly be doing that they have some fault to say about it?
Because the dead are not here to dispute the matter, not to us anyway. We are quite literally left with the words of John Edward, and the faces of the people who hang on his every word for some glimpse of a hereafter, believing there must be something else. Their loved ones have gone on. For them, if not for others, it is enough.
When you bury someone and you put the date of their death on the
You get the idea a little bit. In the manual that I gave out for cold reading, which JREF may make available so that people want to get a copy of it, it's about 85 to 100 pages long. It's a manual which I hope covers everything you need to know about cold reading. I did take off the internet a long transcript of James Edward on Larry King Live Show. The value of taking it off the Larry King Live Show, or a show like this, is that it's not edited. On his own show, Sci-Fi Show, it's always edited. They leave out all the misses and stuff like that. It's very carefully edited, which means that you can't make any judgments at all. And on this long one, there's a person who has some website, and he makes comments on various points during the transcript of Edwards giving a reading on Larry King Live Show, and it's a long thing. So I put the whole transcript on that in the appendix, because you just have to read it to see what's going on. Every single reading Edwards does like that, that's unedited, is he's throwing out names. He says, I get Harry, like a name like Harry, does that make sense to you? And again, living or dead, almost like the George Anderson technique. And if it's living, then the message is for that person. If it's dead, that person giving a message to the caller. And it's always very common names, always a first name, never a last name. Think about it. And there's a few simple rules about what goes on there. And also, many times, even with the common names that is used in this technique, there are people who say, no, I don't know anyone close to anyone by the name of John, and I don't know anyone who's passed on who's named John. Edward doesn't back down, and this is his other technique. He says, look, I am always right. The spirits never lie. You go back and check, and you'll find it out. He does this a lot too. So he browbeats him, so he never admits defeat, and he can't lose that way. That's all he does. It's much less technique. There's no technique at all, actually, where I look at it, except for those simple rules. He just throws out names at random, and they're very common, and he doesn't have any technique at all. If you took my course from me about one of my workshops, or you just read my manual, you'll be better, you have better technique than he has, but he doesn't need it. Just like Gell doesn't need technique in bending spoons. He doesn't need it. Apparently, it's just enough that people calling in, like this lady there you just saw, they're getting comfort, they want to believe in him, and he doesn't have to have any technique at all. He's home free, he's a millionaire, he's going to keep making money at it, and he can't lose. So no matter how bad you are at it, this stuff works. And that's the message we want to get there. Now, how many here have had a reading from a psychic? Okay, and did you find it impressive or any kind? Wendy, how was yours?
Well, it was Mark.
What's that?
So it was Mark. and
oh, it was Mark.
Yeah.
Mark Edward, yeah.
Mark Edward. And I knew better. And the guy is just a natural psychologist. And I knew that I was giving meaning to what he was saying to me. And I also know that he knows me, and he knows me.
Okay, so she's saying
so
she
got
got
the double whammy. You know, it was,
she's a skeptic, and she's saying that I got to say this because people aren't hearing you. I won't hear you on the line. And she's saying that Mark Edward gave her a reading, and she knows that she doesn't believe this is real and stuff like that. Yet still was impressed. He's a good psychologist, and she was impressed by it. Okay, now how much time do we have?
We have about 25 minutes.
Okay, I think we'll try it then. I'm going to have you all pair off with, find someone that hopefully that you don't know too well, but we're going to pair you off. Let's see, 2, 4, Hopefully it's an even number. We'll find if it's an even number. And we're going to have you, I'm going to give you a technique for reading each other, okay? And it'll work, no question about it. So you believe in it. So I'm going to give you this. So if you pair up, sometimes you may have to move your chairs and then you can move back later. And just sit facing each other. That would be nice. We're going to use what I call a systematic scan. There are many techniques you can use to do a thing, but this thing is, believe me, it's very powerful and it should work very well. What you're going to do is we're going to do it systematically. Later, if you practice it, you won't have to do it systematically. You just sit and look at people. You can do it. But I'm going to have you look. We're going to do it systematically. I'm going to have you first look at the person's hair that's opposite you. Okay. Their hair. Look at their hair, and see anything that comes to mind that the hair might say something to you about it. In other words, for example, is this well-kept hair? Is it not well-kept? Does it hair try to make a statement? Is it natural color? Is there any hair? You know, okay. Now, don't worry. Okay. The most important thing is not to worry. If nothing comes to you, fine, forget about it. That's okay. But if something comes to you, just remember it. If something, what kind of a person would have hair like that? Did they take care of it, or they didn't take care of it? Is it casual? Is it well groomed? Is it natural? You know, whatever. If nothing comes to you, fine. That's okay. Don't worry. Okay. So after you've done that, and by the way, it's good to take notes. Yeah, if you can take notes, it'll help. Write something down. If not, nothing comes to you from that. That's okay, because you're going to have a lot of opportunity. You don't need much. Just now look at their face. Now, just look at the face, and for example, is there acne or any marks like that might say something to you or not? Is there makeup on? If there's no makeup on, if there's makeup, is it more than it should be for this occasion, or is it less, or is it well in good taste? Anything you tell you, is the face suggests it's too puffy or overweight? Anything at all. If nothing, fine, don't worry about it. You have lots of opportunity to get other stuff. Okay, and we're going to go relatively fast because you don't need much time on these kinds of things, and you get better at it, you can do it automatically. Now, the next thing is look at the person's body, upper body especially, and how are they seated? Are they good posture? Are they relaxed? Bad posture? Okay. Okay. Bad posture. Anything about their body? Are they slouching? At this point also, you might make a consideration, are they overweight, underweight? They look like someone who spends time in the gym a lot? Are they spend too much time in the pizza parlor? You know, whatever. Also, it's the time to begin looking at their clothing a little bit, too. What kind of clothing do they have on? Is it, again, is it casual? Is it studied? Is it anything that tells you about it? Is it, are they making a statement with their clothing, or are they, anything at all? Now you can go on and look at the legs and the rest of the body, all the way, and see, again, anything that tells you there about their pants, how their legs are covered, anything that tells you about that. And very important, the shoes. The shoes match the socks. Do they have socks? The shoes tell you something. Are they casual shoes? Are they shoes for, used to be, you can't tell now, but there are shoes, there used to be, you could tell that people had some problems with their feet because the kind of shoes they were wearing, but you can't tell these days about that kind of stuff. But shoes can tell you a lot, especially, do they clash? Or do they fit in with everything else? What's that? I'm sorry?
Forrest Gump. Shoes tell you a lot
about the person. Okay. Right, okay. Now, look for any jewelry or any kind of jewelry. You look at the hands especially and see if there's any jewelry. Of course, marriage rings are there, but sometimes when you're reading someone, you will see that they don't have a marriage ring, but it looks like that there's a place where a marriage ring was. And you know, that tells you a lot many times. It used to tell me a lot when I was doing readings, that they took it off deliberately to hide the fact that they're married, once you or I pick it up. And you would see, you can often see, because they've been in the sun or something like that, there's a white little place where the ring was. They've taken it off. They've probably taken it off just before the reading to challenge me in some way. But anyways, you look for little signs like that. Sometimes you get, it gives you a lot, sometimes it tells you nothing. But you're looking for things like that. Fingernails are very important, so check them out. You know, there are people who bite their fingernails, people who take care of their fingernails. Are they long? You know, it can tell you things or not. Yeah, would you say the person is laid back or tense or, this is very important, their posture. Is it good posture or not good posture? And anything like that you can say about it. I think you have enough now. I think you have enough to, now one thing it helps that you got a lot of what I would call descriptors, and now the thing is to put them into a story, to make a story out of it. And when I was playing with Christian Dion, you know, just trying to simulate him, he always, everything he did, he had three places. He put some stuff in the past, what the immediate past or recent past has before this person called or they encountered this person, and things that could lead up to any problems they now have, and then the present, what the situation is present, and the immediate future and the long-range future. Now, a safe thing to tell people, well, we'll get to that later. I'm going to let you stop at this. But sometimes it's good to put what you have into a story or some sort of a framework or context. You don't have to, but it's good. Okay, now we're finished. You're all set. And I'm going to have, would you mind, two mind being willing to openly tell what you come up with? Would you give him his reading now? Just tell him. Give him, tell him what you think he's like, what kind of person he is, and so on. What did you come up with? Now, this is a really good comparison. These are really different people from different worlds, right? I guess. Okay, well, different age levels and so on, right? You're older than she is, right? Okay. Who's going to go first? Who should go first?
Okay, you have a wide variety of tastes. You're pretty laid back. I think I had a couple others, but I think I've forgotten them now. And
what notes did you write down?
Just not things I heard, just about the systematic scan thing. So,
okay, that's good enough so far. How was what Louis said? How was it? What would you say? Say about it. How did it fit you?
It fit me pretty well.
Fit you well? If you would give a rating from 0 to 100, what would you give it? 100?
Yeah.
I only said two things.
Okay, well, the two things you did were right on, apparently. Okay, give him his reading now.
He's a little shy, but laid back. He's very neat and casual. That's all I have.
Close. I'm not exactly very organized, so okay. I wouldn't exactly say neat. But yeah.
What would you give her a rating if you had to give her a rating?
90%.
90%. Okay.
Wow.
Okay. Now let's take one more parent. Then don't. I'm sorry. You had.
Then again, I'm not that shy.
You're not that shy. Okay. Okay. So you had something you didn't believe. That was a little bit off, maybe. Okay. But that's okay because shyness, you know, it's a funny thing. And you're shy in some contexts and shy not in others. Okay.
You want to go first? That's all right. You can go first.
Okay.
Give me. I feel like you have an orderly background. Perhaps maybe parents were in law enforcement or military or something to do with structure. And I think now you've come to sort of rebel against that maybe, and you're coming into your own thinking in different ways and trying to figure out certain things. What else? But you feel a nervousness that you're not sure if it's working, and yeah, but you can be you're very confident and outgoing and strong at times, but maybe it's to cover up for something.
What would you give that? What kind of rating would you give that?
I mean, it was very vague and ambiguous, but you know what?
Yeah.
He was on the right track.
Okay.
You were.
Right track.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Sure.
Okay, so what kind of a rating of accuracy would you give it from 0 to 100?
0 to 100?
Yeah.
100 being best.
Right.
I'll say 70.
70%.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Now give him his reading.
I'm mad at you now. No, I'm just Okay. I'm feeling an energy here.
So do I.
It's you know, you're so like, take me as you see me, man. I have no pretenses. I don't try to be something I'm not. You do hope that you do find people who finally see it, especially girls. It's hard to find. You're not confrontational, and you're really turned off by people who are. You're very sensitive. You do, and you do show it. No matter how much you cover it up, man, it betrays you. It comes out. You're a gentle guy. You're not very physical. You know you can lose a couple of pounds, but you also know you look good, and a lot of girls like you. They just don't connect all the way. You have trust issues. You're looking for a girl who's not very strong, not very masculine. Just someone who's just kind of stable and just loves you, no drama free. You're not driving exactly what you want to drive right now. Don't know why that's an issue. I was told that. Let's see. I'm going to stop there.
Okay. How did you do?
Yeah, really good.
How would you rate that on a scale from 0 to 100?
I'd say, could be 85.
85, okay.
Yeah.
That's the standard.
That's really good.
Now, if you got a reading, how many would rate the reading that they got from their partner between 90 and 100? How many would do that? Okay, so let me see if I got it right. 1, 2, 3. Who else? Did anyone else have a hand up? Okay, so three in this category. Okay, how many would rate it from 80 to 89? 1, 2, 2 there, okay. How many would rate it from 70 to 79? 1, 2, 3. I think I got everyone, okay. And, okay, 60 to 69. Okay, none. 50 to 59? None. Anything lower?
I would say 50 to 59.
What's that?
I would have said 50 to 59.
Okay, so you would be that, so we got one there. Okay, and did I miss anyone?
Well, I belong in the asterisk.
What's that?
I belong in the asterisk.
Yes, you do.
Because what she did was so obvious to me that what she said, it has an amazing duality to it, that it didn't apply and it did apply. So I'm having trouble even picking any of your numbers based on that.
Oh, so you can't decide because you're.
I really can't.
But
I'm too much of a skeptic.
Yeah, but even as a skeptic, and regardless of whether you think it's general or not, sometimes you still can make a judgment as to. Was something obviously wrong, or did it seem to fit even though it's general?
If 0 was an option, I would say it wasn't a reading. It was a generalization that.
Okay, so we'll put an asterisk.
She knows what the hell she's doing.
Okay, so we grab an asterisk. Okay. Okay. Now that's no reflection on you, Barbara. Is it Barbara?
Yeah.
Okay, no reflection on you. You picked the loser. Okay, but you know, this is consistent with what I get. It's amazing, even here, it's about 85 is what the median would be here. And it's I first did a workshop in cold reading and figured out to do this pairing thing. In Oostende, Belgium, that's on the North Shore on the thing. We had a conference, a World Skeptics Conference there. I think it was in the early 80s or something like that. And that's the first time I did it. And it was 85% right on. And ever since then, it's a magic number. 85% is what the average rating I get, and usually much larger groups. And with a TAM, 130 people, the average was right on 85%. So it's spooky, it's a magic number. But it's much better than most psychics do, much better than John Edwards. So you all people are pretty good. And even with a dud, you're pretty good.
Well, statistically, I think we should have had.
It's the first time we've had an asterisk ever. In 30 years, what the early 80s to now is how many years?
Enough to not remember.
Okay, yeah. Okay. So you do get, but actually, and most of the groups I do these workshops turn out to be skeptical groups.
Sure.
And I got the same rating once I did it with but he was psychiatrists and other hospital attendants at the major, one big major mental hospital in Oregon. And I did it for all the staff there. And I did a workshop on cold reading for them, and I think I still got 85%. So it doesn't make a difference whether it's, for this kind of thing, whether they're skeptics or just other people.
Did you ever do one with people who actually believed in it?
Psychics.
Well, most people do, but I never had a group. Most of the workshops people ask me to do are by skeptics. And I always wonder about this. Why are skeptics so interested in learning how to do cold reading? And it's because they need an alternative fallback position to make a living, I think. I'm not sure. So I often wonder, maybe I shouldn't be teaching people how to be good at this, because do we need more psychics out there? My excuse is that this is fun, and it's really, if you do it, it's really amazing how powerful it is, and you learn how it is, that you can do it, and people are just, and even skeptics sometimes are pretty much overwhelmed by it. But ordinary people, they just love you, and they just, and it turns out that, you know what, you've heard of T.A. Waters, haven't you, DJ?
Yes.
Okay, T.A. Waters was we're finished now.
We have just a minute.
Okay, well, T.A. Waters was a well-known mentalist. He was at the Magic Castle and so on. He passed away. But he once wrote one of his books, classic books on mentalism. He wrote the story, didn't name the people in the story. He said he wanted to show the power of psychic readings. He said there was a party at someone's house, at a professor's house in Turnaby, Percy Diaconis' house. He lived in San Francisco then. There was a party at his house, and one of the visitors was a well-known magician, and he did fantastic magic. And it was just amazing. But then the other person was asked to read palms and then do a few of that. And he did those, and that was all the subject of conversation. And even weeks later, Percy was getting people coming back to him who had been at the party and talking about the palm reading. The point he wanted to make is that even the greatest magic won't outdo someone who just gives someone a reading. It takes over. It turns out the two people at that party of Percy's was me, I did the palm reading, and Jerry Andrews, my good friend, and really one of the best magicians ever in the world. He could fool everyone. And yet, his powerful magic, afterwards, all he talked about and and remembered was in my palm readings. I remember one of the guys was one of Percy's colleagues at the Department of Statistics in Stanford, and he's a man who is very famous for having developed a bootlegging technique. You know, he's a very famous statistician, and he was the guy who actually had no doubts about it, that I hit everything on him, and I couldn't have done it. other than abnormal needs. And that's, so next time we're going to get into the Forer effect and get into the nitty-gritty of how this really works, what makes this work, how it fits into psychology, and how it fits into being a skeptic. So. Now, this lecture and the next lecture is devoted to the psychic reading, also called the cold reading, when it's done deliberately by someone who knows what they're doing, who's aware that this is a tool, a technique that's exploiting the limitations or the biases of the human mind and taking advantage of it. I like the psychic reading, being a skeptic, and I think it's and being a person who wrote the major chapter in the annual review. I wrote a chapter, the only time they ever had it, in the annual reviews of psychology, on the psychology of deception. And as a psychologist, I would say my specialist was the psychology of deception. And to me, the cold reading of the psychic reading represents a prototype, a good example that contains everything that we want to talk about, or how people believe, how powerful it is, how vividness, how the power of a story about, and how dealing with yourself can override everything else and create a reality. It's very, very powerful, and I find this a very good thing to use to understand how the mind works and doesn't work, and what motivates us, what gets us excited, and so on. And so what we're going to do now, this lecture will be mostly on giving you samples of readings, a lot by myself, but I've also got Randy in here. And then, if we have time, this lecture, we're going to give you a little thing I do in my workshops. I'm going to pair you off. Hopefully, when I pair you off, I'm going to try, you probably know each other a lot, but try and get you, match you up with people you least know, so you're more effective that way. And I'm going to teach you how to give each other a reading. I'm going to teach you what I call a systematic scan. And it's very powerful. I've done it over and over again, so I know by experience that this works. I did it recently at a workshop on cold reading at the TAM last year, and we had 130 people in that room, as big as I've ever had, because I always like the small group. We paired everyone off, and the average accuracy rating that people gave each other's readings was 85%. By the way, that's a magic number, because that over the last 20 years of my doing these workshops is about the average accuracy rating I get, is about 85%. So that's about, that's a little better than you're going to do, than the ordinary psychics do. So just after this one little reading, you're going to be better than most psychics. Okay, so let's start off with some examples. Let's start off with the Superpower show, okay? That was a show done in Britain on one of the channels there in 1990, and I want to show you a segment where they had me come there on that show because they have a man in England called Christian Dion. Well, you'll see it. Let's talk for himself. Go show that.
John, Christian's here with the tarot cards. If you want Christian to have a look at the future, 071 603 1152. So get dialing now for that. Okay, well the phones are buzzing, and Florence is in Ilford.
As we pick out the cards, there's two things, particularly going back.
Ray Hyman is on the Executive Council of Psychop. He's listening to tapes of English psychic Christian Dion's radio talk show, sent to him in America by a British associate. In the show, Dion questions callers and gives them psychic readings and advice.
London Talkback Radio.
Hyman came over to London to investigate.
Hiya, Yvonne.
All right.
How are you?
Fine.
Shuffling going on?
Shuffle the rounds, yes. Yeah, I think people don't actually believe it. I shuffle them all the time and change them around, but we do, kids, we do.
Certainly do.
Whoops. Over the last sort of basically 12 years, it's been a bit of a dodgy patch, Yvonne.
That's right.
And I feel that you have also been draining yourself a lot recently. You've been getting yourself all wound up.
Yeah.
Very, very much so. And without being rude, you've lost your sparkle.
That's right.
You know, it's like you're not you at the minute. We need to get your sparkle back. I think that will be better as we go into the autumn. It's a bit like being able to view a videotape of someone's life. You can see the past, the present time, the future time, which gives them evidence, if you want, that things you're predicting for the future are good, or at least accurate.
Right. Is there anything particular you wanted to find out about? It just helps him pick up on things. Right. Stay on the line. We're with you soon. If you can just make sure your radio's turned off. You'll hear it down the line.
Well, what do Dion's callers think? Is Yvonne from Acton convinced of his psychic powers?
Yvonne, you just had a consultation with Christian Dion. What do you think of Christian?
I thought he was good. It was right what he said to me.
What were some of the things that he said that were
Well, he said there was ups and downs in the last 12 years, and in the last 2, and also that I tend to put everybody else before myself, and I've lost my sparkle. You know, that was all. And he said about a property deal, which I take it he means moving between now and Easter next year.
Is that something you have been thinking
Well,
about?
we have, yeah. And he seems to think that it will happen.
She's just one person, and many, many thousands of people seem to be just as convinced as she is. And the sad thing is that there are alternative explanations.
Today on News Radio. Back in Buffalo, Hyman is going to show how to read people's minds without psychic powers.
24 minutes after 10 o'clock, my guest in studio, Mr. X, a psychic reader, a gentleman who is able to tell you many things intuitively about yourself through the use of his ability to focus in on your psychic energy, and also with the use of tarot cards, which he has in front of them now. Good morning, Julie.
Good morning.
How are you?
Fine, thank you. And you?
Good. You sound very chipper and very happy. So I also see that you've had probably some daydreams only. It's just really fantasy daydream type of thing where you even thought of maybe running away once in a while and maybe starting life anew with a new relationship and so on. But that's just because of this problem of, as you begin to think of the youth that's now slipping by and facing the future.
Oh, good. And that part of it's taken care of. Well, that was remarkably accurate. I compliment you on that.
Thank you now. Bye-bye.
Cold reading is when you meet a client whom you've never met before. We call it meeting them cold, and give them a reading that is insightful and the client thinks gets to the core of his or her personality. And the way this is achieved, in a nutshell, is to give the client general statements that could apply to anyone, but then you gradually refine them by the feedback you get from the client. And once you get this feedback and refine it, you make sure that the whole message is wrapped up with this rule. The basic rule is you tell them what they want to hear. Now let me give you an example of what is like a cold reading. Let me show you what Christian Dion was doing, just a little sample from him.
This year to Easter of next year, before you're able to get the property matter completely organised. Okay? Now, that doesn't mean to say it's going to take the whole of that time. It's in that time.
Did you say property matters?
Property matters.
What do you mean by that?
Well, because around you property-wise, it's as though there's no settlement at the moment.
Yeah.
He's talking about this property matter, and he said it's not necessarily that during that time, but in this time, which actually, if you think about it, covers quite a big range. There's a big range of things there.
The next 5-year block.
You could break down his whole approach to a simple formula, which I think would be very easy to write on a computer. And the reason you can do this, by the way, is that it's not Christian Dion who makes these readings so successful. It's the people who are listening. They are putting the meaning in there.
I haven't actually got a partner.
At all?
No, not in that way, no.
I'm talking romantically, obviously.
No.
Right. At all?
No, nobody.
All
Not
right.
romantically, no.
All right, well, let that one ride. I couldn't agree with them more in the saying that anybody can do what I do, because we all have the power. It's just that they haven't, A, got the logic, if they want to use that word, to see that we don't tell them general things anyway. When people come for a reading, it's very specific things. And if I was telling people general things, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing, because people wouldn't come and see me. So the skeptics have got the problem, not myself.
About 97% is my estimation of people who do psychic readings believe in what they're doing. Even though, if you listen to them over and over again, they have a very simple formula, very repetitive.
Do you want it in an honest answer? I think they're thick. I honestly think they are thick.
I mean, do you think it's they feel a challenge to their personal
I think
belief
they,
systems?
well, maybe they have a challenge to the belief systems as we all have, but I think they're basically inadequate and they are thick. I mean, they've tried it before. No doubt they'll attack me after that, and they'll try it again. But good luck to them.
She'll always work because she's completely dedicated. I would like, anyway, without further ado, to introduce you to this remarkable medium.